Whoa, let's learn stuff.
Let's learn about marketing research.
All right, so let's start with chapter one, information regarding marketing research. Regardless of the types of products or services offered, all organizations share a common problem. They need information in order to accomplish their goals effectively. And when you think about our world today, where we have digital devices like something like this, right? Or if you're on a laptop computer or a desktop computer, everything that we do, or almost everything we do, really can be tracked electronically. We leave a trail, and that leaves a lot of data available for marketers to sift through, analyze, and use to make decisions about what to do with the organization's product or service and anything related to their marketing efforts and future efforts in product development, research, all of that fun stuff. And all that comes down to marketing research. So, two things about marketing research: it's about gathering data. So, as I mentioned, just the very fact of using these devices, we're already leaving data. And whenever you buy something, well, that's data for the organization to track because they know their sales numbers, what they sold, when it sold, how quickly it sold. So, yeah, lots of different data. And then transforming that data into useful information, because a bunch of numbers is not going to mean anything, right? Like, you could, for example, if you have a social media account, you could take a look at the analytics behind that, what people are clicking, how many visitors you have a day, how many people are buying this, how many people are doing this or that. Well, in the end, those are just numbers. It's really about using statistical analysis to figure out, okay, what kind of decisions can I make with this? So that's kind of a brief, really simplistic overview of what it is that marketing researchers do. And consequently, that's also related to the idea of why Athens State tied the two together in its latest offering of a bachelor's degree, which started in the spring 2024 semester. So that's the Bachelor of Science in Marketing and Analytics. So that's just kind of the backstory behind that. And speaking of that, I will be speaking about that in a moment. And I realized that before starting this video, I didn't gather my documents. So I'm just going to pause the video real quick. Okay, hey, I'm back. You probably didn't even notice I was gone for a couple minutes while I looked for that document. So anyway, going back to this whole idea of lots of data and then using statistical analysis to make sense of all that information, well, there's this sentence right here from our first chapter. Data analytics would allow a marketer to make informed decisions in developing, implementing, and monitoring the firm's marketing plans. Because again, right, when it's just a bunch of numbers, it's not necessarily going to make much sense. We have to run it through statistical analysis to make sense of that. Now, let's get into this Bachelor of Science degree. Part of my work since starting at Athens State in August 2021 was to look into, okay, can we start some kind of degree in marketing? And to do that, it was about gathering research as you might expect. Typical research stuff like looking at what do other universities have and what does that entail and what is it that they're offering, the kind of classes and so forth. And then the other part to that is looking at information like this one where it's secondary data. So I'm going to talk more about that later on in this video, but I wanted to show the job outlook for a marketing degree. And here are examples of occupations related to marketing, how much they make, how many openings a year, the expected growth, and so on. And then also, not, I don't, I won't be showing that, but I also collected primary data. So again, I'll talk more about that later in this video, where I sent out a questionnaire to students at Athens State. And perhaps it hasn't been that long ago, some of you were involved with that. You might remember when I was in other classes with you that I sent out a survey saying, hey, we're trying to come up with this new degree program. Can you please answer these 10 questions or so related to that? So I was gathering data to see student interest and where that might take us, how we could justify that, hey, there is interest in this program, even within the Athens State University student population. So that's an example of using data to inform future actions. So in this case, we decided, yeah, it's worthwhile to pursue this and to get approval from the Alabama Commission on Higher Education to have our own marketing and analytics degree at Athens State University. So just imagine other uses for marketing research to help an organization determine what direction to go. Marketers, what marketers some do research? Oh, there should be like a hyphen or something. Marketers, some do research to, okay, that just doesn't make sense. Sorry. Marketers do research. There we go. Marketers do research to better understand consumers and their interests and behaviors. And the textbook mentioned something about being information detectives, because we're sifting through all that data and trying to figure out, okay, what can we glean from all of these numbers, all of these patterns? So here's an example, grocery store example. When you go to a grocery store and you bring your phone with you and you have your Wi-Fi on, so even if you do not connect to the grocery store's Wi-Fi, well, you're still broadcasting a unique address. So this would be getting technical here, but your MAC address, your media access control address, which is a unique identifier. Each device that can connect to the internet has its own MAC address. And with that, you're broadcasting it, and it could track where you are in the store, how long you were there, and so forth. So and so on. So yeah, in real time they know where you went. And if you think about it, it makes sense that something like that would be useful to a grocery store, because then they can determine, okay, what is it that they're looking at? How long are they taking to get there? So is it effective that the most popular items would be the ones that we put in the very back, so that people will make their way through the entire store just to get that item? So think about milk and eggs. Those are pretty common staples that people always need regularly, right? But they're never at the front of the store. They're always in the back, because grocery stores have figured out that if you go through the rest of the store before getting there, you might find items that you'll like. So, yeah, in many ways, that's an example. That's a very, I was going to say good example, in the sense that that really gives you an idea of the kind of tracking that marketers can use. And so that also brings up other things, right? Like ethical considerations, privacy considerations. But um, let's focus on, what is it that we can get from that? And that's very useful data that theoretically could be useful for the organization, for the marketer to figure out how best to continue offering their products and services to the consumer. So it could be that it's not to be a bad actor, but instead to be useful, for this to be a mutually beneficial type of relationship where the organization can be profitable because they continue to provide excellent services and products, but then it also serves the customers well because they're getting what they want, right? So there is that aspect. Whew. Okay, so with all that said, chapter 1 continues with this exhibit right here, where it breaks down the research process. So that leads me to chapter 2, which is about the research question, formulating the problem. So that's this portion right here. Well, chapter 3 is about the different kinds of research designs. So in this case, yeah, out in the wild, you would determine the type of research based on the problem at hand. So to be able to answer the questions, our research questions, we need data, right? So I talked about big data, the need for data analytics, using statistical analysis to make sense of all of that. Well, data can come from two places, and I already mentioned this real quick earlier in the video also. Primary data, secondary data. So primary data would be the data that is collected specifically for the purpose of answering one or more of your research questions. So now secondary data would be data just that exists anyway, and it's not necessarily specific to your current marketing research project, but it could help answer those questions. So for example, this type of data, when I was doing research for the bachelor's degree, this wasn't necessarily for Athens State, but I was able to use that information. So secondary data can come from other research institutions or government agencies that do research, for example, census data. It could also be data that an organization already collects anyway. So, for example, the grocery store example that I talked about a few minutes ago, they could use that information later on for other purposes to help them with research questions. So, yeah, researchers may gather mountains of secondary or primary data or both, but the data are useless unless they are analyzed and interpreted in light of the problem. So, again, there's that whole analytics concept. And I touched on ethics, so there's that. And then here are the topics from each chapter. So I talked about chapters 2 and 3. So chapter 2 was about formulating the problem, coming up with your research questions. Chapter 3 was about the different types of research designs. So chapter 4 is about secondary data, and then chapter 5 is about primary data.